and they're important and they matter. But truth be told, if we become financially insolvent as a state, if we're fiscally collapsing as a state, if we can't afford to meet our obligations and pay our bills as a state, those social issues become somewhat moot. They're still important, they still matter, they still move people, literally and figuratively, to be in a place or not, but they become very secondary to the financial status of a state, because people also have the ability to move in that regard as well. So those are the two reasons. I mean, adoption and foster care and the pensions were the reasons I ran, but the 7 things I put in the Blueprint for a Better Kentucky are the things that I said, if I'm elected, I'm going to focus on. One of those 7 things, one of the primary ones, I think it was the second or third one of the 7, although they weren't ranked in any particular order, was specifically addressing the pension system. Calling attention to the fact, because while there were 7 bullet points, there were 12 pages of detail behind them. They were simple. Even that wasn't overly complicated. You go back, look it up, read it. Understand that when I was elected saying that we're going to address the very same things that we have been addressing. And we won 106 out of 120 counties. There's a lot of people who say, well, not enough people voted. I'm telling you, a lot more people voted in that election than did in the previous elections. Got more votes than the previous governor ever got, which is neither here nor there. In an off-year election cycle, not a lot of people do vote. I would encourage you to do something about it. I don't care what side of the political aisle you're on. Vote. It's the greatest privilege we have. I used to be an active duty Army officer. A number of you have perhaps served in the military. I served with guys who are dead. Guys my age whose kids have grown up without a father. Shame on all of us if we don't vote. A lot of people, 1.5 million people, have given their lives in uniform. Since the inception of this nation, 1.5 million people have died in this nation's uniform. To give us the privilege to be able to gather here, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, the ability to go to the ballot box, the ability to have a government that truly is of and by and for the people. This is an extraordinary gift that we have. Extraordinary gift. And even now there are people in uniform in this room. Others who have worn this nation's uniform, either in the military or in some kind of a civil enforcement role, who protect and serve us day in and day out. We have an obligation to vote. We have an obligation to be engaged. We truly do. So go back and look at these 7 points and look at these issues. Every one of them was something that I was told, whatever you do, don't talk about that during the campaign. Whatever you do, don't write these things down. Nobody gets elected saying they're going to tackle the pension problem. It's not popular. Nobody gets elected saying they're going to talk about right to work and bring that to this state. Nobody's going to get elected talking about school choice or tax modernization or cutting regulation. Those were 5 of the 7 points right there. Every one of them considered a third rail. Every one of them considered the kiss of death. Don't go there. Nobody ever talks about that during a campaign. Maybe once you're elected, you might, if you think you have the momentum, go ahead and tackle these things. Nonsense. We've been treated like a bunch of fools for a long time in this state as taxpayers and as voters. We have. By people in both parties. And we've been fed a bill of goods from a lot of people for a long time. And people have lied to us time and time and time again about a variety of things, not the least of which is the tenuous nature of this pension system. We'll talk about that during the course of our hour together. But the reason I put these things out there in writing, the reason I talked about them in every debate, the reason I talked about them during the campaign in every one of these forums that I had, like this one, is because they needed to be addressed. Because we're not fools, and we shouldn't be treated like we are. And these people who have kicked these cans and kicked these cans and kicked these cans down the road over and over and over again have not been shooting straight with us. And the whole point in putting them out there was to say that if in fact we are capable of, and I believed we were, and we're proving that we are, capable of having adult-level conversations like adults and dealing with hard decisions, that we can make Kentucky better, period. Absolutely convinced of that. And so we are tackling a lot of things that are hard, they're painful, they're difficult to understand, they're unpleasant to many. And the reality is nobody likes change. Nobody. Nobody. Inside government, outside government, inside your family, inside your office environment, your churches, your civic clubs, whatever the case might be, there's no organization or group, small or large, that you're a part of that likes change. I would bet human beings don't like it. But if you keep kicking cans down the road and lying about things and hiding things and not dealing with the unpleasant facts in the room, nothing gets better. So this is what we've been doing from the beginning. And we have made transformative change. At the end of the day, everything we want, everything. You could care about law enforcement, you could care about education, you could care about infrastructure, roads, bridges, and whatever the case might be. These are fundamental principles of what government is supposed to provide to us. It is. Those three, among others, are the three that people most expect and should to be paid for and addressed out of their tax dollars. But every one of those three, and everything else we might need or want government to provide, can only be paid for with what? What pays for all of it? Taxpayers. Exactly. It's the taxpayers. And guess what? In a free market world, in a world where people can live in this state or the next state down or the next state up or the next state over or across the country or outside of the country, where people have free choice and how blessed we are to live in a nation where people do, the kind of tax policy and whether we address our problems or not determines how many people live here. You go back to World War II. Wasn't that long ago. There's people in this room that were alive when World War II was underway. You go back to the 1940s. The populations of Tennessee, Indiana, and Kentucky were almost the same. We were slightly larger than one of them, slightly smaller than the other, but the truth be told, in 1940, we were all roughly the same size. And indeed, geographically, we're all the same size. If you looked at all the states ranked in order of land mass, we're right in between the two of them, and the three of us are in sequential order in the rank from 50 to 1. So we're very similar to them. Geographically, we're similar. Demographically, we're similar. A lot of similarities. 75 years ago, we were populationally similar. Both those states now have 2 to 2.5 million more people than we do. Why? Because we have been stuck with antiquated policies, outdated tax policies, outdated labor policies, outdated approaches to any number of things. Will Rogers once noted very astutely, the cowboy poet, again, people of a certain generation know who he is, others maybe not. But he was once well quoted by many people, and he was a savvy fellow. He said, even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. Arguably, that's the best we could say. For those who have felt, well, we're on the right track, let's just keep doing it. While others have run over the top of us, we have sat still. How is it possible? We've got better weather, better geography, better location, better seasonality, better quality of life, lower electricity costs than either of those two states I just mentioned. We've got more arable land. We have less extremes in the winter and less extremes in the summer. We have less cataclysmic events that happen meteorologically as it relates to storm activity, etc., than either of those states. And they border us. And they each have 2 million plus people more than us. How is this possible? Could you imagine if we had 2 million more people in this state? Seriously. If we had 2 million more people in Kentucky and just 30 or 40% of them pay taxes, which is a conservative but reasonable estimation of how many would, could you imagine 600,000 or 800,000 more taxpayers? Every single thing you care about, every single thing that has been getting cut for years and that we would like to have more money in, would be getting more money. Education, law enforcement, infrastructure, all the above. We would have no lack of ability to pay for the things we want if we had another 500,000 plus taxpayers. But why is it that they're going to these states and others and not this one? Why is it that we've been growing incrementally while those around us over the last 75 years have not been growing as slow? Because they have gotten their house in order and they have addressed things that are hard, that are change agents. And they've made changes that have made their states more attractive. And in a world where people have choices, and if you don't believe it, go down to the Fort Campbell community. Which side of the state line do people live on? How many of you all have ever been at Fort Campbell? Maybe stationed, a number of you. Where does everybody live? They live in Clarksville. They live on the other side. Why? Because it's more advantageous to them. Truth be told, it's no prettier on that side. They don't have more amenities. It's actually a little nicer on our side. It really is, in terms of the pure geography and the beauty of the landscape. But people go where their wallet incentivizes them to go. Capital goes where their wallet incentivizes it to go. Companies invest where there is an incentive for them to come, where their employees are not overly taxed, where they are not overly taxed. I did one of these town hall forums the other day up in Harrison County. The largest employer in that county is a company called 3M. Some of you may know this, you may not. If not, you'll learn a little anecdote for the day. All the Post-it notes that are made in Kentucky. Did you know that? 94 billion Post-it notes are made in Kentucky every year in Harrison County. And this plant, which pays tens of millions of dollars into the tax system, it is far and away the largest supporter of public